Hello, welcome to Every Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be reading a story, which is called Ben-Hur. But before that, we are doing the synopsis. But before that, we are doing the Bible. So, I hope what we have in store today will be good for you. I hope you guys like the story today. And we have one person on.
Yay!
Yay!
Hi,
Two.
hi, Granny Bear.
Hi.
Okay.
Here is Heavy D.
Howdy. So, whoa, dude, you don't have to move it. I'm good. All right, so we finished Hebrews chapter 3 yesterday. This is really far at the end. So now we've got Hebrews chapter 4. Therefore, while the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. For good news came to us just as to them, but the message they heard did not benefit them, because they were not united by faith with those who listened. For we who have believed enter that rest, as he has said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Although his works were finished from the foundation of the world, for he has somewhere spoken of the seventh day in this way, and God rested on the seventh day from all his works. And again in this passage he said, they shall not enter my rest. Since therefore it remains for some to enter it, and those who formerly received the good news failed to enter because of disobedience, again he appoints a certain day, today, saying through David so long afterward in the words already quoted, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken of another day later on. So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and spirit, of joints and marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. And no creature is hidden from his sight, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who is in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. That is Hebrews chapter 4. I hope you're enjoying the reading of God's Word. That is the English Standard Version of the Bible. And now it is time for the synopsis. Here she comes. Miss Mystery. You'll see what I mean in a minute. No, really, I mean it. Anybody want a peanut? Ah!
He's talking about my shirt. It says mystery. Yeah, so what happened in the last chapter, it was the one, not a lot happened actually.
Oh, really? Not a lot happened in the last chapter.
Do you want to elaborate, Dad?
What? Tell me what happened in the last chapter.
I can't remember. I might have fallen asleep.
Do you remember the prison?
Oh, right, that chapter. Sorry. I think I fell asleep. Sorry.
Oh my goodness, how can you fall asleep?
I don't know.
Basically,
So
there were two women in the prison that were just as happy and delighted. They had like this
Dad.
nice spacious room.
there were two people in a prison and they got leprosy. And leprosy is very bad.
They did trust in God, though.
It was Ben-Hur's mother and sister. And that's very bad because yeah, it's really bad and very sad. And I'm really, really hoping that, because I know that Jesus cured lepers, so maybe that'll happen. Jesus can cure them, I bet. Right?
Hold on. She sent me an email. Keep talking.
Because I know he did cure a lot of things, and I'm definitely certain that he has cured lepers. So I'm kind of placing my bets.
So,
I'm fairly certain that they're gonna get cured. Hey, Granny Bear.
Granny Bear pointed out that they were within arm's reach of the temple, yet could not go there. They heeded every call of the trumpet to stop and pray.
Yeah, they.
And she mentioned Joseph's story in this email that she sent me too.
Kim, I think you need to.
You need to re-listen to it. It's really, this is my
Yeah.
favorite part of the whole.
It was a really
I know,
powerful thing yesterday.
I
You
just
need to
forgot for a second.
you need to use your phone time tomorrow listening to chapter 6.
I was remembering.
Okay, it's fine. All right. Okay. Sorry. Grace to help in time of need. Yes. We are in a time of need. Okay. So, I'm going to pick up with chapter 3. I'm going to move this because. All right. Chapter 3, Jerusalem again. About the hour Gesius the keeper made his appearance before the tribune in the tower of Antonia, a footman was climbing the eastern face of Mount Olivet. The road was rough and dusty, and vegetation on that side burned brown, for it was the dry season in Judea. Well for the traveler that he had youth and strength, not to speak of the cool, flowing garments with which he was clothed. He proceeded slowly, looking often to his right and left, not with the vexed, anxious expression which marks a man going forward uncertain of the way, but rather the air with which one approaches an old acquaintance after a long separation, half of pleasure, half of inquiry, as if he were saying, I am glad to be with you again. Let me see in what you are changed. As he rose higher, he sometimes paused to look behind him over the gradually widening view terminating in the mountains of Moab. But when at length he drew near the summit, he quickened his step, unmindful of fatigue, and hurried on without pause or turning of the face. On the summit, to reach which he bent his steps somewhat right of the beaten path, he came to a dead stop, arrested as if by a strong hand. Then one might have seen his eyes dilate, his cheeks flush, his breath quicken, effects all of one bright, sweeping glance at what lay before him. The traveler, good reader, was no other than Ben-Hur, the spectacle, Jerusalem. Not the holy city of today, but the holy city as left by Herod, the holy city of the Christ. Beautiful, yet, as seen from old Olivet, what must it have been then? Ben-Hur betook him to a stone and sat down, and, stripping his head of the close white handkerchief which served it for covering, made the survey at leisure. The same has been done often since by a great variety of persons under circumstances surpassingly singular, by the son of Vespasian, by the Islamite, by the Crusader, conquerors all of them, by many a pilgrim from the great New World, which waited discovery nearly 1,500 years after the time of our story, but of the multitude probably not one has taken that view with sensations more keenly poignant, more sadly sweet, more proudly bitter than Ben-Hur. He was stirred by recollections of his countrymen, their triumphs, their vicissitudes, their history, the history of God. The city was of their building, at once a lasting testimony of the crimes and devotion, their weakness and genius, their religion and their irreligion. Though he had seen Rome to familiarity, he was gratified. The sight filled a measure of pride which would have made him drunk with vain glory, but for the thought, princely as the property was, it did not any longer belong to his countrymen. The worship in the temple was by permission of strangers. The hill where David dwelt was a marble cheat, an office in which the chosen of the Lord were wrung and wrung for taxes, and scourged for very deathlessness of faith. These, however, were pleasures and griefs of patriotism common to every Jew of the period. In addition, Ben-Hur brought with him a personal history which would not out of mind for other consideration whatever, which the spectacle served only to freshen and vivify. A country of hills changes but little where the hills are of rock. It changes not at all. The scene Ben-Hur beheld is the same now, except as respects the city. The failure is in the handiwork of man alone. The sun dealt more kindly by the west side of Olivet than by the east, and men were certainly more loving towards it. The vines with which it was partially clad, and the sprinkling of trees, chiefly figs and old wild olives, were comparatively green. Down to the dry bed of the Cedron, the verdure extended a refreshment to the vision. There Olivet ceased and Moriah began. A wall of bluff boldness, white as snow, founded by Solomon, completed by Herod. Up the wall the eye climbed, course by course, of the ponderous rocks composing it, up to Solomon's porch, which was at the pedestal of the monument, the hill being the plinth. Lingering there a moment, the eye resumed its climbing, going next to the Gentiles' court, then to the Israelites' court, then to the women's court, then to the court of the priests, each a pillared tier of white marble, one above the other in terraced retrocession, over them all a crown of crowns infinitely sacred, infinitely beautiful, majestic in proportions, effulgent with beaten gold. Lo, the tent, the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies. The ark was not there, but Jehovah was. In the faith of every child of Israel, he was there, a personal presence. As a temple, as a monument, there was nowhere anything of man's building to approach that superlative apparition. Now, not a stone of it remains above another. Who shall rebuild that building? When shall the rebuilding be begun? So asks every pilgrim who has stood where Ben-Hur was. He asks, knowing the answer is in the bosom of God, whose secrets are not least marvelous in their well-keeping. And then the third question, what of him who foretold the ruin which has so certainly befallen? God or man of God? Or, enough of that question is for us to answer. And still Ben-Hur's eyes climbed on and up, over the roof of the temple, to the hill Zion, consecrated to sacred memories, inseparable from the anointed kings. He knew the cheesemonger's valley dipped deep down between Moriah and Zion, that it was spanned by the Xystus, that there were gardens and palaces in its depths, but over them all his thoughts soared with the vision to the great grouping on the royal hill, the house of Caiaphas, the central synagogue, the Roman praetorium, Hippicus, the eternal, and the sad but mighty cenotaphs, Phasaelus and Merimee, all relieved against Gareb, purpling in the distance. And when midst them he singled out the palace of Herod, what could he but think of the king who was coming, to whom he was himself devoted, whose path he had undertaken to smooth, whose empty hands he dreamed of filling, and forward ran his fancy to the day the new king should come to claim his own and take possession of it, of Moriah and its temple, of Zion and its towers and palaces, of Antonia frowning darkly there just to the right of the temple, of the new unwalled city of Bezetha, of the millions of Israel to assemble with palm branches and banners, to sing, rejoicing because the Lord had conquered and given them the world. Men speak of dreaming as if it were a phenomenon of night and sleep. They should know better. All results achieved by us are self-promised, and all self-promises are made in dreams awake. Dreaming is the relief of labor, the wine that sustains us in act. We learn to love labor, not for itself, but for the opportunity it furnishes for dreaming, which is the great under-monotone of real life, unheard. I'm frozen?
I don't see you frozen.
Granny Bear says I'm frozen. La 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 la.
Nope.
Men speak of dreaming as if it were a phenomenon of night and sleep. They should know better. All results achieved by us are self-promised, and all self-promises are made in dreams awake. Dreaming is the relief of labor, the wine that sustains us in act. We learn to love labor, not for itself, but for the opportunity it furnishes for dreaming, which is the great under-monotone of real life, unheard, unnoticed because of its constancy. Living is dreaming. Only in the grave are there no dreams. Let no one smile at Ben-Hur for doing that which he himself would have done at that time and place under the same circumstances. The sun stooped low in its course, a while the flaring disk seemed to perch itself on the far summit of the mountains in the west, brazening all the sky above the city, and rimming the walls and towers with the brightness of gold. Then it disappeared as with a plunge. The quiet turned Ben-Hur's thought homeward. There was a point in the sky a little north of the peerless front of the Holy of Holies, upon which he fixed his gaze. Under it, straight as a lead line would have dropped, lay his father's house, if yet the house endured. The mellowing influences of the evening mellowed his feelings, and, putting his ambitions aside, he thought of the duty that was bringing him to Jerusalem. Out in the desert, while with Ilderim, looking for strong places and acquainting himself with it generally, as a soldier studies a country in which he has projected a campaign, a messenger came one evening with the news that Gratus was removed and Pontius Pilate sent to take his place. Messala was disabled, and believing him dead, Gratus was powerless and gone. Why should Ben-Hur longer defer the search for his mother and sister? There was nothing to fear now. If he could not himself see into the prisons of Judea, he could examine them with the eyes of others. If the lost were found, Pilate could have no motive in holding them in custody, none at least in which could not be overcome by purchase. If found, he would carry them to a place of safety, and then, in calmer mind, his conscience at rest, this one first duty done, he could give himself more entirely to the king who was coming. He resolved at once. That night he counseled with Ilderim and obtained his assent. 3 Arabs came with him to Jericho, where he left them and the horses, and proceeded alone and on foot. Malach was to meet him in Jerusalem. Ben-Hur's scheme, be it observed, was as yet a generality. In view of the future, it was advisable to keep himself in hiding from the authorities, particularly the Romans. Malach was shrewd and trusty, the very man to charge with the conduct of the investigation. Where to begin was the first point. He had no clear idea about it. His wish was to commence with the Tower of Antonia. Tradition, not of long standing, planted the gloomy pile over a labyrinth of prison cells, which, more even than the strong garrison, kept it a terror to the Jewish fancy. A burial such as his people had been subjected to might be possible there. Besides, in such a strait, the natural inclination is to start search at the place where the loss occurred, and he could not forget that his last sight of the loved ones was as the guard pushed them along the street in the direction of the tower. If they were not there now, but had been, some record of the fact must remain, a clue which had only to be followed faithfully to the end. Under this inclination, moreover, there was a hope which he could not forego. From Simonides he knew Amra, the Egyptian nurse, was living. It will be remembered, doubtless, that the faithful creature, the morning the calamity overtook the Hurs, broke from the guard and ran back into the palace, where, along with other chattels, she had been sealed up. During the years following, Simonides kept her supplied, so she was there now, sole occupant of the great house, which, with all his offers, Gratus had not been able to sell. The story of its rightful owners sufficed to secure the property from strangers, whether purchasers or mere occupants. People going to and fro past it with whispers. Its reputation was that of a haunted house, derived probably from the infrequent glimpses of poor old Amra, sometimes on the roof, sometimes in a latticed window. Certainly no more constant spirit ever abided than she, nor was there ever a tenement so shunned and fitted for ghostly habitation. Now, if he could get to her, Ben-Hur fancied she could help him to knowledge which, though faint, might yet be serviceable. Anyhow, sight of her in that place, so endeared by recollection, would be to him a pleasure next to finding the objects of his solicitude. So, first of all things, he would go to the old house and look for Amra. Thus resolved, he arose shortly after the going down of the sun and began descent of the mount by the road which, from the summit, bends a little north of east. Down nearly at the foot, close by the bed of the Cedron, he came to the intersection with the road leading south to the village of Siloam and the pool of that name. There he fell in with a herdsman driving some sheep to market. He spoke to a man and joined him, and in the company passed by Gethsemane on into the city through the fish gate. Chapter 4. Ben-Hur at his father's gate. It was dark when, parting with the drover inside the gate, Ben-Hur turned into a narrow lane leading to the south. A few of the people whom he met saluted him. The bouldering of the pavement was rough. The houses on both sides were low, dark, and cheerless. The doors all closed from the roofs. Occasionally he heard women crooning to children. The loneliness of his situation, the night, the uncertainty cloaking the objects of his coming, all affected him cheerlessly. With feelings sinking lower and lower, he came directly to the deep reservoir now known as the Pool of Bethesda, in which the water reflected the overpending sky. Looking up, he beheld the northern wall of the Tower of Antonia, a black frowning heap reared into the dim steel-gray sky. He halted as if challenged by a threatening sentinel. The tower stood up so high and seemed so vast, resting apparently upon foundations so sure, that he was constrained to acknowledge its strength. If his mother were there in living burial, what could he do for her? By the strong hand, nothing. An army might beat the stony face with ballista and ram and be laughed at. Against him alone the gigantic southeast turret looked down in the self-containment of a hill. Containment. And he thought cunning is so easily baffled, and God always the last resort of the helpless. God is sometimes so slow to act. In doubt and misgiving, he turned into the street in front of the tower and followed it slowly on to the west. Over the Bezetha, he knew where there was a khan, where it was his intention to seek lodging while in the city, but just now he could not resist the impulse to go home. His heart drew him that way. The old formal salutation which he received from the few people who passed by him had never sounded so pleasantly. Pleasantly, all the eastern sky began to silver and shine, and objects before invisible in the west, chiefly the tall towers on Mount Zion, emerged as from a shadowy depth and put on spectral distinctness, floating, as it were, above the yawning blackness of the valley below, very castles in the air. He came at length to his father's house. Of those who read this page, some there will be to divine his feelings without prompting. They are such as had happy homes in their youth, no matter how far that may have been back in time, homes which are now the starting points of all recollection, paradises from which they went forth in tears, and which they would now return to if they could, as little children, places of laughter and singing, and associations dearer than any or all the triumphs of afterlife. At the gate on the north side of the old house, Ben-Hur stopped. In the corners, the wax used in the sealing up was still plainly seen, and across the valves was the board with the inscription, "This is the property of the emperor." Nobody had gone in or out of the gate since the dreadful day of the separation. Should he knock as of old? It was useless, he knew, yet he could not resist the temptation. Amra might hear and look out of one of the windows on that side. Taking a stone, he mounted the broad stone step and tapped 3 times. A dull echo replied. He tried again, louder than before, and again, pausing each time to listen. The silence was mocking. Retiring into the street, he watched the windows, but they too were lifeless. The parapet on the roof was defined sharply against the brightening sky. Nothing could have stirred upon it unseen by him, and nothing did stir. From the north side he passed to the west, where there were 4 windows, which he watched long and anxiously, but with as little effect. At times his heart swelled with impotent wishes. At others he trembled at the deceptions of his own fancy. Amra made no sign. Not even a ghost stirred. Silently then he stole round to the south. There too the gate was sealed and inscribed, the mellow splendor of the August moon, pouring over the crest of Olivet, since termed the Mount of Offense, brought the lettering boldly out, and he read, and was filled with rage. All he could do was to wrench the board from its nailing and hurl it into the ditch. Then he sat upon the step and prayed for the new king, and that his coming might be hastened. As his blood cooled, insensibly he yielded to the fatigue of long travel in the summer heat, and sank down lower, and, at last, slept. About that time 2 women came down the street from the direction of the Tower of Antonia. Approaching the palace of the Hurs, they advanced stealthily with timid steps, pausing often to listen. At the corner of the rugged pile, one said to the other in a low voice, "This is it, Tirzah." And Tirzah, after a look, caught her mother's hand and leaned upon her heavily, sobbing but silent. "Let us go on, my child, because—" The mother hesitated and trembled. Then, with an effort to be calm, continued, "Because when morning comes, they will put us out of the gate of the city to return no more." Tirzah sank almost to the stones. "Ah, yes," she said between sobs. "I forgot. I had the feeling of going home, but We are lepers and have no homes. We belong to the dead." The mother stooped and raised her tenderly, saying, "We have nothing to fear. Let us go on." Indeed, lifting their empty hands, they could have run upon a legion and put it to flight. And, creeping in close to the rough wall, they glided on, like two ghosts, till they came to the gate, before which they also paused. Seeing the board, they stepped upon the stone in the scarce cold tracks of Ben-Hur, and read the inscription, "This is the property of the emperor." Then the mother clasped her hands, and with upraised eyes moaned in unutterable anguish, "What now, mother? You scare me." And the answer was presently, "O Tirzah, the poor are dead. He is dead." "Who, mother?" "Your brother. They took everything from him, everything, even this house." "Poor," said Tirzah vacantly. "He will never be able to help us." "And then, mother?" "Tomorrow. Tomorrow, my child, we must find a seat by the wayside, and beg alms as the lepers do. Beg, or—" Tirzah leaned upon her again, and said, whispering, Let us die." "No," the mother said firmly. "The Lord has appointed our times, and we are believers in the Lord. We will wait on him even in this. Come away." She caught Tirzah's hand as she spoke, and hastened to the west corner of the house, keeping close to the wall. No one being in sight there, they kept on to the next corner, and shrank from the moonlight, which lay exceedingly bright over the whole south front and along a part of the street. The mother's will was strong. Casting one look back and up to the windows on the west side, she stepped out into the light, drawing Tirzah after her, and the extent of their affection was then to be seen, on their lips and cheeks, in their bleared eyes, in their cracked hands, especially the long snaky locks, stick with loathsome ichor, and, like their eyebrows, ghastly white. Nor was it possible to have told which was mother, which was daughter. Both alike seemed witch-like old. "Hist!" said the mother. "There is someone lying upon the step. A man! Let us go round him." They crossed to the opposite side of the street quickly, and in the shade there moved on till before the gate, where they stopped. "He is asleep, Tirzah." The man was very still. "Stay here, and I will try the gate." So saying, the mother stole noiselessly across, and ventured to touch the wicket. She never knew if it yielded, for that moment the man sighed, and turning restlessly, shifted the handkerchief on his head in such manner that the face was left upturned and fair in the broad moonlight. She looked down at it and started, then looked again, stooping a little, and arose and clasped her hands and raised her eyes to heaven in mute appeal. An instant so, and she ran back to Tirzah. "As the Lord liveth, the man is my son, thy brother," she said in an awe-inspiring whisper. "My brother, Judah?" The mother caught her hand eagerly. "Come," she said in the same enforced whisper. "Let us look at him together once more, only once. Then help thou thy servants, Lord." They crossed the street hand in hand, ghostly quick, ghostly still. When their shadows fell upon him, they stopped. One of his hands was lying out upon the step, palm up. Tirzah fell upon her knees and would have kissed it, but the mother drew her back. "Not for thy life! Not for thy life! Unclean! Unclean!" she whispered. Tirzah shrank from him as if he were the leprous one. Ben-Hur was handsome as the manly are. His cheeks and forehead were swarthy from exposure to the desert sun and air, yet under the light mustache the lips were red and the teeth shone white, and the soft beard did not hide the full roundness of chin and throat. How beautiful he appeared to the mother's eyes! How mightily she yearned to put her arms around him and take his head upon her bosom and kiss him, as had been her wont in his happy childhood. Where got she the strength to resist the impulse? From her love, O reader. Her mother love, which if thou wilt observe well, hath this unlikeness to any other love, tender to the object, it can be infinitely tyrannical to itself, and thence all its power of self-sacrifice. Sorry, I bit my tongue. Not for restoration to health and fortune, not for any blessing of life, not for life itself, would she have left her leprous kiss upon his cheek. Yet touch him she must. In that instant of finding him, she must renounce him forever. How bitter, bitter hard it was, let some other mother say. She knelt down, and crawling to his feet, touched the sole of one of his sandals with her lips, yellow though it was with the dust of the street, and touched it again and again. Her very soul was in the kisses. He stirred and tossed his hand. They moved back, but heard him mutter in his dream, "Mother, Amra, where is—" He fell off into the deep sleep. And this is where I'm going to show you the picture. Here are the two ladies standing over the sleeping Judah Ben-Hur. There he is. Tirzah stared wistfully. The mother put her face in the dust, struggling to suppress a sob so deep and strong it seemed her heart was bursting. Almost she wished he might waken. He had asked for her. She was not forgotten. In his sleep he was thinking of her. Was it not enough? Presently the mother beckoned to Tirzah, and they arose, and taking one more look, as if to print his image past fading, hand in hand they recrossed the street. Back in the shade of the wall there they retired and knelt, looking at him, waiting for him to wake, waiting some revelation, they knew not what. Nobody has yet given us a measure for the patience of a love like theirs. By and by, the sleep being yet upon him, another woman appeared at the corner of the palace. The two in the shade saw her plainly in the light, a small figure, much bent, dark-skinned, gray-haired, dressed neatly in servant's garb, and carrying a basket full of vegetables. At sight of the man upon the step, the newcomer stopped. Then, as if decided, she walked on, very lightly as she drew near the sleeper. Passing round him, she went to the gate, slid the wicket latch easily to one side, and put her hand in the opening. One of the broad boards in the left valve swung ajar without noise. She put the basket through, and was about to follow, when, yielding to curiosity, she lingered to have one look at the stranger, whose face was below her in open view. The spectators across the street heard a low exclamation, and saw the woman rub her eyes as if to renew their power. Bend closer down, clasp her hands, gaze wildly around, look at the sleeper, stoop and raise the outlying hand, and kiss it fondly, that which they wished so mightily to do, but dared not. Awakened by the action, Ben-Hur instinctively withdrew the hand. As he did so, his eyes met the woman's. "Amra, oh, Amra, is it thou?" he said. The good heart made no answer in words, but fell upon his neck, crying for joy. Gently he put her arms away, and lifting the dark face wet with tears, kissed it, his joy only a little less than hers. Then those across the way heard him say, "Mother, Tirzah, O Amra, tell me of them. Speak, speak, I pray thee." Amra only cried afresh, "Thou hast seen them, Amra. Thou knowest where they are. Tell me they are at home." Tirzah moved, but the mother, divining her purpose, caught her and whispered, "Do not go, not for life. Unclean, unclean." Her love was in tyrannical mood, though both their hearts broke. No, she's not a Time Lord. Though both their hearts broke, golly, I can't talk anymore. He, Ben-Hur, should not become what they were, and she conquered. Meantime, Amra, so entreated, only wept the more. "Wert thou going in?" he asked presently, seeing the board swung back. "Come then, I will go with thee." He arose as he spoke. The Romans, be the curse of the Lord upon them. The Romans lied. The house is mine. Rise, Amra, and let us go in. A moment, and they were gone, leaving the two in the shade to behold the gate staring blankly at them, the gate which they might not ever enter more. They nestled together in the dust. They had done their duty. Their love was proven. Next morning they were found and driven out of the city with stones. Begone, ye are the dead, go to the dead! With the doom ringing in their ears, they went forth. Chapter 5, The Tomb Above the King's Garden. Nowadays, travelers in the Holy Land, looking for their famous place with the beautiful name, the King's Garden, descend the bed of the Cedron or the curve of the Gihon and the Hinnom as far as the Old Well and Rogel, take a drink of the sweet living water and stop, having reached the limit of the interesting in that direction. They look at the great stones with which the well is curbed, ask its depth, smile at the primitive mode of drawing the purling treasure, and waste some pity on the ragged wretch who presides over it. Then, facing about, they are enraptured with the Mounts Moriah and Zion, both of which slope toward them from the north, one terminating in Ophel, the other in what used to be the site of the city of David. In the background, up far into the sky, the garniture of the sacred places is visible. Here the Haram with its graceful dome, yonder the stalwart remains of Hippicus, defiant even in ruins. When that view has been enjoyed and is sufficiently impressed upon the memory, the travelers glance at the Mount of Offense, standing in rugged stateliness at their right hand, and then at the Hill of Evil Counsel over on the left, in which, if they be well up in the scriptural history and in the traditions rabbinical and monkish, they will find a certain interest not to be overcome by superstitious horror. It were long to tell all the points of interest grouped around that hill. For the present purpose, enough that its feet are planted in the veritable orthodox of the moderns, orthodox Hades of the moderns, the Hades of brimstone and fire, in the old nomenclature Gehenna, and that now, as in the days of Christ, its bluff face opposite the city on the south and southeast is seamed and pitted with tombs which have been immemorially the dwelling places of lepers, not singly, but collectively. There they set up their government and established their society. There they founded a city and dwelt by themselves, avoided as the accursed of God. The second morning after the incidents of the preceding chapter, Amra drew near the well in Rogel and seated herself upon a stone. One familiar with Jerusalem looking at her would have said she was the favorite servant of some well-to-do family. She brought with her a water jar and a basket, the contents of the latter covered with a snow-white napkin. Placing them on the ground at her side, she loosened the shawl which fell from her head, knit her fingers together in her lap, and gazed demurely up to where the hill drops steeply down into Aceldama and the potter's field. It was very early, and she was the first to arrive at the well. Soon, however, a man came, bringing a rope and a leathern bucket. Saluting the dark-faced woman, he undid the rope, fixed it to the bucket, and waited customers. Are we good? Did you get hurt? Oh, okay. Others who chose to do so might draw water for themselves. He was a professional in the business and would fill the largest jar the stoutest woman could carry for a gerah. Amra sat still and had nothing to say. Seeing the jar, the man asked after a while if she wished it filled. She answered him civilly, "Not now," whereupon he gave her no more attention. When the dawn was fairly defined over Olivet, his patrons began to arrive. Are we good?
No, we're not. If you're going to be destructive, you can go lay down in your bed.
I wasn't being destructive.
Dropping it on the floor is being destructive.
I didn't drop it on the floor.
Okay, when the dawn was fairly defined over Olivet, his patrons began to arrive, and he had all he could do to attend to them. All the time she kept her seat, looking intently up at the hill. The sun made its appearance, yet she sat watching and waiting, and while she thus waits, let us see what her purpose is. Her custom had been to go to the market after nightfall. Stealing out unobserved, she would seek the shops in the Tyropian, or those over by the fish gate in the east, make her purchases of meat and vegetables, and return and shut herself up again. The pleasures she derived from the presence of Ben-Hur in the old house once more may be imagined. She had nothing to tell him of her mistress or Tirzah, nothing. He would have had her move to a place not so lonesome. She refused. She would have had him take his own room again, which was just as he had left it, but the danger of discovery was too great, and he wished above all things to avoid inquiry. He would come and see her often as possible. Coming in the night, he would also go away in the night. She was compelled to be satisfied, and at once occupied herself contriving ways to make him happy. That he was a man now did not occur to her, nor did it enter her mind that he might have put by or lost his boyish tastes. To please him, she thought to go on her old round of services. He used to be fond of confections. She remembered the things in that line which delighted him most, and resolved to make them, and have a supply always ready when he came. Could anything be happier? So next night, earlier than usual, she stole out with her basket and went over to the Fishgate market. Wandering about, seeking the best honey, she chanced to hear a man telling a story. What the story was, the reader can arrive at with sufficient certainty when told that the narrator was one of the men who had held torches for the commandant of the Tower of Antonia, when down in cell 6 the hers were found. The particulars of the finding were all told, and she heard them, with the names of the prisoners, and the widow's account of herself. The feelings with which Amra listened to the recital were such as became the devoted creature she was. She made the purchases and returned home in a dream. What a happiness she had in store for her boy! She had found his mother! She put the basket away, now laughing, now crying. Suddenly she stopped and thought it would kill him to be told that his mother and Tirzah were lepers. He would go through the awful city over on the hill of evil counsel. Into each infected tomb he would go without rest, asking for them, and the disease would catch him, and their fate would be his. She wrung her hands. What should she do? Like many a one before her, and many a one since, she derived inspiration, if not wisdom, from her affection, and came to a singular conclusion. The lepers, she knew, were accustomed of mornings to come down from the sepulchral abodes in the hill and take a supply of water for the day from the well in Rogel. Bringing their jars, they would set them on the ground and wait, standing afar until they were filled. To that the mistress and Tirzah must come, for the law was inexorable and admitted no distinction. A rich leper was no better than a poor one. So Amra decided not to speak to Ben-Hur of the story she had heard, but go alone to the well and wait. Hunger and thirst would drive the unfortunates thither, and she believed she could recognize them at sight. If not, they might recognize her. Meantime Ben-Hur came, and they talked much. Tomorrow Malak would arrive, and the search should be immediately begun. He was impatient to be about it. To amuse himself, he would visit the sacred places in the vicinity. The secret, we may be sure, weighed heavily on the woman, but she held her peace. When he was gone, she busied herself in the preparation of things good to eat, applying her utmost skill to the work. At the approach of day, as signaled by the stars, she filled the basket, selected a jar, and took the road to Enrogel, going out by the fish gate, which was earliest open, and arriving as we have seen. Shortly after sunrise, when business at the well was most pressing, and the drawer of water most hurried, when in fact half a dozen buckets were in use at the same time, everybody making haste to get away before the cool of the morning melted into the heat of the day, the tenantry of the hill began to appear and move about the doors of the tombs. Somewhat later they were discernible in groups, of which not a few were children so young that they suggested the holiest relation. Numbers came momentarily around the turn of the bluff, women with jars upon their shoulders, old and very feeble men hobbling along on staffs and crutches. Some leaned upon the shoulders of others. A few, the utterly helpless, lay like heaps of rags upon litters. Even the community of superlative sorrow had its love light to make life endurable and attractive. Distance softened without entirely veiling the misery of the outcasts. From her seat by the well, Amra kept watch upon the spectral groups. She scarcely moved. More than once she imagined she saw those she sought. That they were there upon the hill she had no doubt. That they must come down and near she knew. When the people at the well were all served, they would come. Now, quite at the base of the bluff, there was a tomb which had more than once attracted Amra by its wide gaping. A stone of large dimensions stood near its mouth. The sun looked into it through the hottest hours of the day, and altogether it seemed uninhabitable by anything living, unless perchance by some wild dogs returning from scavenger duty down in Gehenna. Thence, however, and greatly to her surprise, the patient Egyptian beheld two women come, one half supporting, half leading the other. They were both white-haired, both looked old, but their garments were not rent, and they gazed about them as if the locality were new. The witness below thought she even saw them shrink terrified at the spectacle offered by the hideous assemblage of which they found themselves part. Slight reasons, certainly, to make her heart beat faster and draw her attention to them exclusively, but so they did. The two remained by the stone a while, then they moved slowly, painfully, and with much fear toward the well, whereat several voices were raised to stop them, yet they kept on. The drawer of water picked up some pebbles and made ready to drive them back. The company cursed them. The greater company on the hill shouted shrilly, "Unclean! Unclean!" Surely, thought Amra of the two as they kept coming, surely they are strangers to the usage of lepers. She arose and went to meet them, taking the basket and the jar. The alarm at the well was immediately subsided. "What a fool," said one, laughing. "What a fool to give good bread to the dead in that way." "And to think of her coming so far," said another. "I would at least make them meet me at the gate." Amra, with better impulse, proceeded. If she should be mistaken, her heart arose into her throat. And the farther she went, the more doubtful and confused she became. 4 or 5 yards from where they stood waiting for her, she stopped. Then the mistress she loved, whose hand she had so often kissed in gratitude, whose image of matronly loveliness she had treasured in memory so faithfully, and that the Tirzah she had nursed through babyhood, whose pains she had soothed, whose sports she had shared, that the smiling, sweet-faced, songful Tirzah, the light of the great house, the promised blessing of her old age, her mistress, her darling, they, the soul of the woman sickened at the sight. "These are old women," she said to herself. "I never saw them before. I will go back." She turned away. "Amra?" said one of the lepers. The Egyptian dropped the jar and looked back, trembling. "Who called me?" she asked. "Amra." The servant's wondering eyes settled upon the speaker's face. "Who are you?" she cried. "We are they you are seeking." Amra fell upon her knees. "Oh, my mistress, as I have made your God my God, be he praised that he has led me to you," whatever it says in the paper. and upon her knees the poor, overwhelmed creature began moving forward. "Stay, Amra! Come not nearer! Unclean! Unclean!" The words sufficed. Amra fell upon her face, sobbing so loud the people at the well heard her. Suddenly she arose upon her knees again. "Oh, my mistress, where is Tirzah?" "I am here, Amra, here." "Will you not bring me a little water?" The habit of the servant renewed itself. Putting back the coarse hair fallen over her face, Amra arose and went to the basket and uncovered it. "See," she said, "here are bread and meat." She would have spread the napkin upon the ground, but the mistress spoke again. "Do not so, Amra. Those yonder may stone you and refuse us drink. Leave the basket with me. Take up the jar and fill it, and bring it here. We will carry them to the tomb with us. For this day you will then have rendered all the service that is lawful. Haste, Amra." The people under whose eyes all this had passed made way for the servant, and even helped her fill the jar, so piteous was the grief her countenance showed. "Who are they?" a woman asked. Amra meekly answered, "They used to be good to me." Raising the jar upon her shoulder, she hurried back. In forgetfulness she would have gone to them, but the cry, "Unclean, unclean, beware!" arrested her. Placing the water by the basket, she stepped back and stood off a little way. "Thank you, Amra," said the mistress, taking the articles into possession. "This is very good of you." "Is there nothing more I can do?" asked Amra. The mother's hand was upon the jar, and she was feverish with thirst, yet she paused and, rising, said firmly, "Yes, I know that Judah has come home. I saw him at the gate night before last, asleep on the step. I saw you wake him." Amra clasped her hands. "Oh, my mistress, you saw it, and did not come?" "That would have been to kill him. I can never take him in my arms again. I can never kiss him more. Oh, Amra, Amra, you love him, I know." "Yes," said the true heart, bursting into tears again, and kneeling, "I would die for him." "Prove to me what you say, Amra." "I am ready." "Then you shall not tell him where we are, or that you have seen us. Only that, Amra." "But he is looking for you. He has come from afar to find you. He must not find us. He shall become what we are. Here, Amra, you shall serve us as you have this day. You shall bring us the little we need. Not long now, not long. You shall come every morning and evening thus, and the voice trembled. The strong will almost broke down. "And you shall tell us of him, Amra. But to him you shall say nothing of us. Hear you?" "Oh, it will be so hard to hear him speak of you, and see him going about looking for you, to see all his love, and not tell him so much as that you are alive." "Can you tell him we are well, Amra?" The servant bowed her head in her arms. "No," the mistress continued, "wherefore be silent altogether. Go now, and come this evening. We will look for you. Till then, farewell." "The burden will be heavy, O my mistress, and hard to bear," said Amra, falling upon her face. "How much harder would it be to see him as we are?" the mother answered, as she gave the basket to Tirzah. "Come again this evening," she repeated, taking up the water and starting for the tomb. Amra waited, kneeling until they had disappeared. Then she took the road sorrowfully home. In the evening she returned, and thereafter it became her custom to serve them in the morning and evening, so that they wanted for nothing needful. The tomb, though ever so stony and desolate, was cheerless than the cell in the tower had been. Daylight gilded its door, and it was in the beautiful world. Then one can wait death with so much more faith out under the open sky. That's the end of chapter 5. I thought we were reading chapters 3 and 4. There's 5. We started on 3, though, right? There's 4. Maybe I skipped a page somewhere. I was confused. All right, so I'll figure that out, and you guys have a good night, and God bless you, and we will see you again tomorrow. God bless.